friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today's video, I'm going to be discussing the books that I read in June. Oh my god, that was like a month ago. But if you guys like this video, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys want me to do specific reviews on some of these books, also let me know. I already have a review for one of these books, so I'll leave that link down below. But every book that I have mentioned in this video in the description, and let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the two books that helped me wrap up this series that I've been trying to finish since I read it back in like 2018. That's going to have to be A Reaper at the Gates and A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. This is the third and the fourth book of An Ember in the Ashes quartet, which is a YA high fantasy following young Laia, who ends up, I'm just going to hold up the third book here, whose brother ends up getting kidnapped by the Marshall Empire, and she goes undercover to figure out exactly what happened to him, where he is, what's going on. Meanwhile, Elias is a soldier, has been a soldier his entire life, has been bred up to be a soldier, and he's starting to question whether or not he should be and whether or not what he's fighting for is actually right. This series follows 4 books. I don't actually know how long, like timeline-wise it is, if it's like a year or something, but this is the third book and this is the fourth book. I gave each of them 5 stars. I read the third book and I was like, I need the next one, I need the final book, and I bought the next one when I got paid. I don't have very many critiques on either or. I just think that this is a wonderful series. It's amazing. It has so many lush characters and so many amazing descriptions, and just everyone was so fleshed out, and we got to see kind of their arcs wrap up really nicely. I do have an issue with this last one in terms of how a certain character's arc wrapped up. I felt like that one character deserved a little more happiness than having to do what she has to do now that the book is finished, but it's fine, because at least she lived. At least she lived. Not every character can say that after this book. These two also gonna be favorites of the year for me. It's just like, Sabaa Tahir can do no wrong in my eyes, and I need another high fantasy from her stat, even though she literally just released a book back in March. The next one I have a full-fledged review on, so you guys can go ahead and look at that for more information and trigger warnings. But that is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is a YA, I suppose, urban fantasy, following young Yadriel as he's trying to prove himself as a brujo to his family. He came out a little bit ago as trans, and his family has been struggling to figure out how he fits into this puzzle piece. And it's not as if they hate him, but it's obviously a big culture shock for the entire family and the community. Now, he and his cousin Maritza are trying to prove himself as a brujo, and he ends up performing the ceremony that solidifies him, that typically happens on your 15th birthday, I want to say, for it's the quinces. Now, on the same night, his cousin Miguel ends up getting murdered, and there's no trace of him. They can't find a body. They can't even figure out where he went. Now, trying to use this to prove himself, he tries to summon Miguel and ends up summoning Julian, who is actually the bad boy of the school, who also somehow magically died under some weird pretenses. So now the two of them, with this weird ghost situation, are trying to figure out what happened to Julian and exactly whether or not it has any correlation to his cousin Miguel. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. This was a surprising 5 for me. I really struggled with it in the beginning. There was just a lot of like misgendering. There was some dead naming as well, and I found that it was just like a lot. That's coming from someone who's cis, so I was struggling with it, but I really did in fact like the world, the culture, and I liked the main romance. I think the main romance was very sweet and soft and exactly what we needed, or what I needed. So I recommend it, but I will leave my full-length review, which has all of the trigger warnings and content warnings you should be aware of if you are deciding to pick this book up and you're not entirely sure. Moving on to my disappointment, and probably one of my disappointments of the biggest disappointments of the year, and that is Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps by Kai Ashante Wilson. I also recently learned that it's not Sorcerer of the Wild Peeps, it's Wild Deeps. I've had this book since 2019, and no one in the comment section has bothered to tell me that it was Wild Deeps and not Wild Peeps. Sometimes the brain cells don't rub together. But this is an adult high fantasy novella about Demain, a young necromancer slash demigod, who ends up joining this crew who is about to traverse into the Wild Deeps, which is a very harsh territory where no one rarely ever makes it out alive. Now, because Demain is slowly falling in love with the captain of the ship, he ends up trying his hardest to keep him alive, as well as everyone else in the crew. I gave this a 1 star. 1 star. I almost DNF'd it. I kept pushing through simply because it's a novella and because I was hoping and praying that I would find something redeemable. I think that the use of AAVE in this book was very new to me. I have never seen someone use AAVE in a high fantasy setting, so this was very new and novel. I guess it's a very novel idea that I have seen. I haven't read a lot of books of AAVE, so if y'all want to recommend those for me, comments. But I enjoyed that aspect of it, and I liked how expansive the world is. You can tell that Kai Ashante Wilson tried to put a lot of effort into this world. With that being said, I just felt like the world was too large for a novella. I genuinely had no concept of what the demigod system is supposed to be like, how the magic system worked, where Demain fit in all of this, how he happened upon this crew, what makes the captain so interesting and so beautiful to him that he wanted to save it and risk everything. It was just lacking on all fronts, and I'm so sad. It took me like 3 years to read this book because I had hyped it up so much in my mind, because I was like, demigods, necromancers, it's gay, yes, only to find out that's one of my biggest disappointments of the year. I don't even know. Like, I had such high hopes for this book, and it just all fell flat in every single aspect, and I was so sad. Like, I spent literally the entire book going, there's something here that I'm gonna like. There's something here that I'm gonna like. Like, even on top of that, it doesn't even end in a happy ending. It's a very tragic book, and I'm just like, not only did we not have gays who got to live happily ever after, but I have no understanding of what just happened. And I tried really, really hard. And finally, the last book that I read in June, and one that I read to kind of break up the depression and the disappointment, that was Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps. And that is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. This is an adult contemporary romance following Delilah Green, right here, who ran away from Bright Falls the minute she turned 18 and never looked back. She has now trying to make herself successful as a photographer, and I believe New York. That is until one day her cousin Astrid, her stepsister Astrid, her wonderful stepsister who she does not get along with, calls her up and tells her that she needs to come because she was hired to work for her wedding. Now, while she's here, she starts to find herself falling for Claire Sutherland, who was one of the only out gays that were out during the time that they were in high school, but she also didn't get along with Claire because she was Astrid's best friend. Now, with this backdrop of the wedding, Delilah Green is trying to avoid emotions as much as possible, and Claire is also just comes with too much baggage for her to really invest herself in Delilah. And then things ensue. I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. This was, as thick as this book is, this could easily be a book that I read in one sitting. I thought that the writing was just done so beautifully. It reads super quickly, you get super pulled into the world and the character relationships and the motivations. I found that the world of Bright Falls felt like a real place to me. Watch me find out in the comments that it is actually a real place. And I also found that the plot made sense. It wrapped around really nicely. There wasn't an instance where I was like, wait, what? And on top of that, I also felt like that each character was very full. Like, each individual character, from Delilah to Claire to Astrid to everyone in between, was fleshed out, and they felt like tangible people almost. You know how much in romances sometimes, like, realistically only the main character feels like a real person. The love interest is just there to be a love interest, and the side characters are just there to fill gaps in the story. But I didn't think that in this book. I thought that it worked out really well, and it was just done so beautifully. And I cannot wait to pick up Astrid Parker Doesn't Fall, which is the sequel. It's just, this was so good, and I highly recommend it to anyone. I will have my review link down below that does have trigger warnings, because I've been very bad about trigger warnings recently. I don't know why. But yeah, highly recommend it. I think it's another new favorite of mine. And it touches on every little checklist that I have for romances, and it's gay. So You know what I mean? It works. But that is it for the books that I read in June. I read about 5 books, which is about typically that I used to read back before like 2020s, and this is like a win for me. And most of them are, a good chunk of them were 5 stars. So also, but if you guys like this video, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys want me to do more of these, I do wrap ups once a month. But if you want me to do any kind of review for anything of these books, let me know. As I said, I will have my Goodreads, and I'll probably have my Storygraph reviews down there, not so much my Goodreads, but I'll have those linked down below as well. On that, I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. This comes out on Friday. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully you guys had a wonderful week. If not, hopefully things look up for you. But until next time, bye.